Hello everyone, and welcome to my Sister Wives For You channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Although there has always been friction in the Brown family, Robyn's surprising discovery of Kody and Aurora spending time together in the park without her knowledge added yet another unexpected chapter to the complicated story of sister wives. Secrets, jealousies, power struggles, and hazy boundaries between relationships have long characterized the complex family structure, but this incident was unique. It wasn't just about Robyn subtly manipulating the backstage affairs or Kody snatching time away from the other wives. It was instead about the man at the center of it all being spotted with his stepdaughter Aurora in a way that instantly caused fans to scoff and start talking about loyalty, openness, partiality, and the changing dynamics that have come to characterize their reality TV world. As the mother who nurtures, protects, and even shields her children from the darker storms of multiple marriages, Robyn has always positioned herself as the emotional center of the family. But what happens when she is the one left out of the loop, caught off guard by something that feels too close for comfort? Everything Robyn believed she had painstakingly constructed started to falter that day in the park when she happened upon Kody laughing, joking, and walking with Aurora in what appeared to be an exceptionally private father-daughter bonding session. Robyn's sense of control was severely damaged by the picture of Kody sitting next to Aurora on a park bench, his face glowing with a tenderness and attention that she hadn't seen from him in months. For the first time, she wasn't sure if it was a sign of their unadulterated bond or a sign of how much she had let go of him. The scene may have appeared innocuous to an outsider, a man hanging out with his stepdaughter, but to Robyn, who has frequently accused the other wives of undermining her status in Kody's life, it felt like a betrayal, a conscious exclusion, and a decision that caused her to wonder if Kody was emotionally veering in unexpected directions. The park itself, which is often a place of openness and relaxation, felt all of a sudden like a battleground of embarrassing revelations and hidden realities. Robyn never anticipated being surprised to see her husband seated so comfortably with Aurora. She had only come there to decompress after another heated argument with Kody at home. Their body language was devoid of tension and a sense of duty, but rather of a familiarity that verged on intimacy. Not romantic intimacy, but a closeness that appeared more robust than Kody's recent behavior toward his wives or even some of his other children. When surrounded by the wider Brown family, Aurora, who had always been portrayed as timid, sensitive, and partly protected by her mother's protective bubble, seemed more open and alive in that park with Kody than she had ever looked on television. Her guard was down. She was smiling freely, and her body language conveyed warmth and ease in a manner that even Robyn rarely did. Not because Robyn didn't want her daughter to be close to Kody, but rather because she couldn't shake the question that kept coming to mind. Why wasn't she in the picture? Why wasn't she invited? It was more agonizing than any dispute with Mary, Janelle, or Christine to feel like an outsider looking in on the woman who had sacrificed, planned, and put up with years of tension to become Kody's closest confidant. Robyn's thoughts were racing through every scenario as she stood motionless and observed from a distance. Was there a hint of secrecy that implied Kody desired a relationship with Aurora that lived completely outside of her supervision? Or was this just his attempt to be a better father figure to Aurora, something she had always wanted him to do? Control has always meant survival in Robyn's world. She has been able to keep Kody under control and establish herself as his necessary wife, protecting her from the emotional devastation that ruined his previous marriages. However, after witnessing Kody and Aurora together, she came to the realization that she might not be the one controlling everything. But what if Aurora was taking on a role she had never imagined? What if Kody discovered in Aurora the commitment, loyalty, and simple love that his wives had once shown him? Aurora's gentle admiration and undemanding presence may be like oxygen to a drowning man, especially for a man like Kody who relies on being admired and who is withered under Christine and Janelle's criticism. And what would Robyn have done if that were the case? Robyn seemed increasingly uneasy as she watched. As they conversed, Aurora drew closer to Kody, making animated gestures with her hand, and he nodded with an expression of intense enthusiasm that he no longer frequently displayed during family conversations. There was only an attentive father listening, as though Aurora's comments were more important than anyone else's, and there was no defensiveness, dismissiveness, or violent fury. Robyn realized that she might be seeing a potentially harmful change in the family structure. She had acted as a liaison between Kody and her kids for years, limiting access and policing their interactions to make sure nothing ever shattered her meticulously crafted story of harmony. However, Aurora now appeared to have cut a straight path to Kody's affections, avoiding Robyn completely. She was frightened by that. Robyn, unable to control her emotions, finally came close, her voice piercing their laughter like a knife. Startled, Kody and Aurora turned, their faces instantly settling back into courteous neutrality. However, Robyn had witnessed enough of those vulnerable moments to understand that Aurora was more than simply another kid in Kody's large family network. She had grown to be his confidant, his safe haven, and the person he could confide in without worrying about backlash or confrontation. And the betrayal was nearly intolerable for Robyn, who had spent years presenting herself to Kody as just that. The next exchange was uncomfortable, heated, and full of unstated charges. Robyn insisted on knowing why they had decided to keep their intentions to spend the day together a secret rather than share them with her. As protective as ever, Kody maintained that it was nothing more than an impromptu outing, but his tone was unconvinced. Aurora, caught in the midst, fell silent again, her amusement gone, her fear replaced by the quick realization of the seriousness of what had been revealed. Being excluded was only one aspect of Robyn's astonishment. Another was discovering that the very authority she had struggled so hard to preserve was eroding. She had always felt that she and Kody shared a common goal and acted together in defiance of the other wives' comments and the opinions of others. However, she now saw that Kody could form his own coalitions and find comfort and approval elsewhere, even in her own family. It was a terrible blow that made her doubt herself and showed how weak her grip on him really was. As the drama played out, viewers quickly made assumptions about its meaning. Some claimed that it was encouraging evidence that Kody was at last acting as a father figure and providing Aurora with the care she needed. Others, however, viewed it as just another illustration of Kody's incapacity to set limits, a reminder of how his intense desire for approval sometimes drew him into complex and improper situations that made it difficult to distinguish between emotional dependence and parental responsibilities. But for Robyn, the story was easier and far more painful. She had been caught off guard, and she suddenly recognized that she was not the unflappable queen of Kody's universe that she had always thought she was. Even though the park visit was intended to be benign, the emotional fallout was anything but. It revealed the rifts in her own family, the shifting allegiances she had never anticipated, and placed her in a precarious position. Whether she decided to increase her control over the story, strengthen her hold on Aurora, or face Kody in private later, one thing was certain. Robyn had been shocked, and in the delicate world of sister wives, shock frequently signaled the start of a storm that would have far-reaching effects. The aftermath of that park encounter lingered long after the three of them left the scene, with Robyn simmering in a stew of confusion, jealousy, and raw indignation that she struggled to contain. For years, she had been the gatekeeper between Kody and her children, ensuring that every interaction was framed within the narrative she controlled, protecting them from the chaos of his temper, but also binding them tightly to her influence. Yet now, Aurora had bypassed that gate entirely, meeting Kody on her own terms, developing a rhythm with him that Robyn hadn't orchestrated. The unsettling thought that her daughter had grown beyond her control hit Robyn harder than she expected, and it was compounded by the realization that Kody himself had encouraged, even welcomed, this shift. It felt like a betrayal on two fronts, a daughter reaching out independently and a husband embracing that independence without consulting her. Back at home, the silence between Robyn and Kody stretched into something unbearable, punctuated only by her pointed sighs and his defensive explanations that never satisfied her. Every time he insisted that she was overreacting, that he was simply being a father to Aurora, the words felt hollow, because she had seen something in his expression at the park, an openness, a softness, a pride, that he had withheld from her for weeks. That was what made the shock so devastating. It wasn't just the secrecy. It was the evidence that Kody still had the ability to give his heart away, but this time, he wasn't giving it to her. For Aurora, the fallout was even more complicated. She had always been the quiet one, the child most sensitive to conflict, the daughter who carried the weight of her mother's emotions on her shoulders without ever saying it out loud. Spending time with Kody had felt like a relief, an escape from that constant emotional heaviness, a chance to simply be seen as herself rather than as an extension of Robyn's will. She hadn't meant for it to be secretive or rebellious, but the freedom of laughing with Kody in the park without her mother hovering nearby gave her a taste of something she hadn't realized she was craving: independence, validation, and maybe even a deeper father-daughter bond that went beyond what Robyn had carefully curated. Now, faced with Robyn's outrage, she was torn between loyalty to her mother and the newfound spark of connection with Kody, and that inner tug-of-war threatened to pull her apart. If she sided with her mother, she would lose the fragile bridge she had finally built with Kody. If she defended Kody, she risked her mother's wrath, which often came disguised as guilt and tears, but was just as suffocating as open anger. The park, once a space of joy, now loomed in her memory as the place where she had accidentally ignited a fire she wasn't sure she had the strength to put out. Meanwhile, Kody himself was caught in his own spiral of rationalizations and denial. To him, the time with Aurora had been uncomplicated, even refreshing. She hadn't questioned him the way his wives did, hadn't challenged him the way Janelle or Christine used to, hadn't demanded more than he was willing to give. With Aurora, he could simply exist as a father figure without the burden of marital conflict, without the constant sense of failure that haunted his relationships with his other children. But when Robyn caught them, his defensive walls shot up, not because he had done anything wrong in his mind, but because he knew how it looked and, more importantly, he knew how it made Robyn feel. The last thing he wanted was to jeopardize the loyalty of the one wife who had stood by him through the wreckage of his plural family, but at the same time, he couldn't ignore the quiet joy he had felt in that park. For Kody, the dilemma was clear: either retreat from Aurora to appease Robyn or risk deepening the rift in his marriage by continuing to nurture the bond. And for a man who often chose immediate validation over long-term strategy, the temptation to cling to Aurora's quiet devotion was almost irresistible. The broader Brown family, though absent from the actual scene, would inevitably be drawn into the drama once the whispers began to spread. Christine, now long separated from Kody, might roll her eyes and see it as yet another example of his inability to manage boundaries, perhaps even chuckling at Robyn finally experiencing the kind of betrayal she herself had endured for years. Janelle, pragmatic and quietly resigned, would likely interpret it as proof of what she had always suspected: that Kody's relationships were built not on fairness or structure, but on whoever made him feel good in the moment, and now that person just happened to be Aurora. Even Mary, still lingering in her ambiguous position on the outskirts of Kody's life, might watch the fallout with a strange mix of bitterness and vindication, privately noting that Robyn was finally tasting the same loneliness and exclusion she had suffered. In other words, the incident at the park wasn't just about one man, one wife, and one daughter. It was about the fragile house of cards that had been teetering for years and the ripple effect of even the smallest fracture. Robyn, however, wasn't ready to see it in such broad strokes. For her, it was personal. She replayed the image of Kody and Aurora together over and over in her mind, scrutinizing every detail for hidden meaning. Was the way Aurora leaned toward him simply the body language of a daughter, or was it something deeper, something that signaled she trusted him more than she trusted her own mother? Was Kody's laugh genuine joy, or was it relief at finally finding someone who didn't hold him accountable for his failures? The more she thought about it, the less she trusted her own instincts, and the more desperate she became to reassert control. That desperation led her to difficult choices, subtle comments to Aurora, reminding her of everything she had sacrificed for her, emotional conversations with Kody designed to guilt him back into her orbit, and even quiet tears that weren't entirely about sadness, but about strategy. For Robyn, love and control had always been intertwined, and the park incident was proof that both were slipping away. In the end, the day at the park would not be remembered for the sunshine, the laughter, or the simplicity of a father and daughter sharing time together. Instead, it would be remembered as the day Robyn's illusions cracked, the day she realized that loyalty could shift even within her own home, the day she stood on the edge of losing the very control she had built her world around. The shock that coursed through her body in that moment didn't fade with time. It lingered, shaping her interactions, fueling her insecurities, and planting the seeds of conflicts yet to come. For the Brown family, already fractured and reeling from years of division, it was yet another spark threatening to ignite a blaze. And for fans watching from the outside, it was a reminder of why this family story continues to captivate, because in the world of sister wives, even a simple day in the park can unravel into drama that leaves everyone questioning where the loyalties truly lie.